So before this video starts, I do want to give a quick trigger warning for everything discussing under the book. I know we know that Hollywood is already a pretty scary place, but when you get down into the details of it, it's nightmare inducing. So if you feel the need to click off this video at any point, feel free to, I don't blame you. And with that being said, let's get into the most disgusting movie directors. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. My name is Tuv. And we're gonna get into some pretty serious topics, but before doing so, I at least want to get some lighthearted news out of the way, and that is that I may not be uploading as much during October. Now, why is that good news? Why is that yay? We're not gonna see this dude anymore. It's not that. I'll probably still be streaming, but I'm working on a big project that isn't anything I've announced ever. All right, so this isn't 2K Cats. This isn't my music. This isn't anything that you guys know of. I'm working on something really big for November, okay? For November. And in November, I'm gonna be uploading a lot. So I'm just letting you guys know, if you guys see like one video or two videos out in October, that's why. We're getting ready for November, and just know we're gonna bring this channel's community back. I can't say too much, but just know it's something you guys have been begging for years, and I'm doing it, okay? I'm doing it. Yes, peer pressure worked. And I'm not gonna say what it is. You could talk about it amongst yourself in my Discord or whatever. Yeah, but with that lighthearted news being out of the way, let's get into the disturbing world of movie directors. Harvey Weinstein. So here's a name that probably doesn't need an introduction. Harvey Weinstein, the guy who basically found himself on the receiving end of the Me Too movement when his past somehow came crashing down on him back in 2017. But what's wild is that even now in 2025, this man's legal troubles just won't end. Now, before I tell you about him, we should probably clarify something. Weinstein isn't technically a director, he's a producer, but either way, he's probably one of the most powerful ones in Hollywood, or was, I should say. I mean, we're talking about the co-founder of Miramax Films here. This guy produced Shakespeare in Love, which won Best Picture at the Academy Awards, and Pulp Fiction. Yeah, you definitely know Pulp Fiction. He had serious power. The kind where one phone call could make or break careers. But that doesn't make you immune to justice or reckoning in general. The allegations against him span decades, with incidents dating back to the 1990s. In winter of 1993 to 1994, actress Annabella Sciorra alleges Weinstein raped her at her Manhattan apartment after an industry dinner. She says he dropped her off, then reappeared at her door and forced his way inside. In July of 2006, former production assistant Mimi Haley says Weinstein invited her to her New York home, then ignored her objections, pulled out her tampon, and forcibly performed oral sex on her. She told him no repeatedly, but he didn't stop. On March 18th of 2013, aspiring actress Jessica Mann alleges Weinstein coaxed her to a hotel in Midtown Manhattan, forced her to disrobe, ordered her onto the bed, and raped her. According to prosecutors, quote, he got on top of her and raped her, forcing his penis into her vagina. Jessica just laid there. And that's just 3 cases. The allegations span across 80 or more women, with incidents dating back to the 1970s. The alleged pattern was always the same. Weinstein uses power in Hollywood to lure women to private meetings at hotels and his homes, often under pretense of discussing career opportunities. Now you might think, didn't this guy already get convicted? Well, yeah, but it's complicated. In 2020, Weinstein was found guilty in New York and sentenced to 23 years in prison. Then, in December of 2022, he was found guilty in Los Angeles of 3 counts of sexual assault and got an additional 16 years. So he's looking at 39 years total, right? The thing is, in April of 2024, New York's highest court overturned his original conviction. The court said the judge made egregious errors by letting women testify about allegations that weren't actually part of the charges. So what happened next? Another trial. In June of 2025, Weinstein faced his retrial where 3 women testified about their alleged assaults. Polish model Kasia Sokola testified that when she was 19, Weinstein lured her to his hotel room claiming he had a script to show her, then pushed her onto a bed, stripped off her clothes, and forced oral sex on her while she pleaded, "Please don't, please stop." The jury convicted Weinstein of sexually assaulting Haley, but acquitted him of assaulting Sokola. On the man charge, they couldn't reach a verdict. The deliberations were chaotic because the jury foreman said he'd been threatened by another juror. Judge Curtis Farber declared a mistrial on the man charge and said he could sentence Weinstein on September 30th, but only if there's no retrial. If prosecutors retry the case, it would be his 4th trial overall. So where does this leave us? The man who once held Hollywood's golden ticket is now fighting multiple legal battles from Rikers Island, facing the reality that he'll likely die in prison regardless of what happens next. Christophe Ruggia. The Me Too movement, the one we just talked about, well, you should know that it shook the whole world, not just the States. And this next case is a part of that. It also exposed France's film industry and became the country's first major Me Too trial. Christophe Ruggia, a 60-year-old French director, was just convicted in February of this year for essaying actress Adèle Haenel, the actress from Portrait of a Lady on Fire. This was when she was just a child. This apparently happened back in 2002 when Ruggia directed Haenel in his film Les Diables, and she was only 12 years old when the filming started, and his age at the time, he was 36. Now, the movie itself is deeply disturbing. It's about an incestuous relationship between siblings, and it actually has sex scenes with minors and close-ups of Haenel's naked body. It already sounds terrible, and unfortunately, it gets worse. According to court documents, between 2001 and 2004, Haenel went to see Ruggia nearly every Saturday, and she accused him of caressing her thighs and touching her genitals and breasts during these visits. That's over 100 Saturday afternoons of alleged abuse. The court said he used the power he had over Haenel to control her, slowly cutting her off from everyone she loved. Haenel told them she felt trapped, like she couldn't escape. He'd convinced her that her whole career depended on him. All of this took a heavy toll on the mental health of a girl who was just starting to discover the world. She began to feel guilty once filming ended, and that's when thoughts started creeping in. At the trial, she said, "You can't abuse children like that. There are consequences. No one helped that child." Speaking of her younger self. As for Ruggia, he denied the accusations and suggested to the court that Haenel's accusations were, quote, revenge, because he couldn't make a second film with her. But get this, investigators found notes on Ruggia's computer where he wrote about 12-year-old Haenel's, quote, overflowing sensuality. I mean, what kind of adult writes that about a child? In February of 2025, Ruggia was found guilty and sentenced to 4 years with 2 years suspended and 2 years under house arrest with an electronic bracelet. He was also ordered to pay Haenel €15,000 in damages and €20,000 for her years of psychological therapy. Haenel actually quit the French film industry in 2023. She called out what she saw as the industry's general complacency towards sexual predators. She said she wanted to make her retirement a political statement against how the profession turns a blind eye to abusers. But this pattern of abuse and power continues in the entertainment industry. And that's why we move on to the next director, someone who, I don't know, seems untouchable to some. Victor Salva. Jeepers Creepers was one of 2001's biggest horror hits. It follows two siblings driving through rural Florida who encounter a terrifying creature called the Creeper that haunts humans every 23 years. Chances are you've seen it at least once. The film became an instant classic, spawning sequels and cementing itself as a staple of early 2000s horror. But what most people don't know is that the man behind the franchise is Victor Salva. And worse, Victor Salva is a convicted child who somehow managed to keep working in Hollywood for decades. In 1988, Salva pled guilty to multiple sexual offenses involving a child under 14, including lewd and lascivious conduct, oral SA, and procuring a child for pornography. The victim was 12-year-old Nathan Forrest Winters, who was starring in Salva's movie Clown House. But what makes this case even more sickening than it already is that Salva apparently actually filmed the SA. He videotaped himself raping the minor. And although he was sentenced to only 3 years in prison, he served just 15 months. By the time Jeepers Creepers hit theaters in 2001, Salva had been a free man for over a decade, as if nothing had ever happened. Instead of being blacklisted from Hollywood forever, Salva just kept making movies. Turns out, since getting out of prison in 1989, he made 9 films. Disney even hired him to direct Powder in 1995, a movie about a teenage boy with special powers. Yes, Disney. The family-friendly company gave a convicted child a $10 million budget to make a film featuring a young protagonist, and throughout all this, his mentor Francis Ford Coppola kept supporting him. Coppola executive produced the Jeepers Creepers films, and his production company held the rights to the franchise. Now, I don't know, but now that we know Salva's background, the Jeepers Creepers movies are really creepy. This Reddit user has pointed out that the monster specifically targets young boys, uses their body parts, and even sniffs the main character's underwear. It's like watching someone's predatory fantasies play out on screen. When Jeepers Creepers 3 came out in 2017, it included dialogue where a character justifies child saying about a young girl, "Can you blame him though? I mean, look at her. The heart wants what it wants, am I right?" That line was cut out after backlash. And now that you know all this, I doubt you'll ever look at the Jeepers Creepers movies the same way again, because the real monster was never on the screen. Ruggero Deodato. Have you ever watched a movie and found yourself wondering if what you're looking at is actually real? Well, that's exactly what happened back in 1980 with Cannibal Holocaust. People went into theaters expecting a horror film, but the deaths looked so shockingly real that rumors spread fast. Had the director actually killed people on camera? And I'm not even exaggerating, that's what the audiences actually wondered. Things spiraled so far out of control that the Italian filmmaker behind it, Ruggero Deodato, was put on trial for murder. Cannibal Holocaust premiered on February 7th, 1980 in Milan, and like I said, it was unlike anything audiences had ever seen at the time. The film follows an American professor who travels to the Amazon to investigate the disappearance of 4 documentary filmmakers. What he finds is their recovered footage, and it's gross. The movie was essentially a pioneer of the found footage genre, almost 20 years before the Blair Witch Project made it famous. The thing is, the whole artistic side of it might have gotten a little out of hand. He had the actors who played the documentary crew sign contracts agreeing to disappear from all media for an entire year after filming. He wanted it to be authentic, that people would think they might actually be dead. And well, it worked. 10 days after the film's premiere, Italian authorities confiscated it, and Deodato was charged with obscenity. But that was just the beginning. When the film was released in France a year later, a magazine article suggested that some of the deaths depicted were real, essentially claiming it was a snuff film. Italian authorities then charged Deodato with murder. He was facing 30 years in prison, and of course the trial then became a media circus. The director had to contact actor Luca Barbersci, who played one of the dead filmmakers, to gather all the supposedly deceased actors. They all appeared on an Italian TV show to prove they were alive, but prosecutors weren't satisfied with that. They needed to know about this infamous impalement scene. He had to explain in court exactly how he achieved the gruesome effect, using a bicycle seat attached to a pole, with the actress sitting on the seat and holding a piece of wood in her mouth. The murder charges were dropped, but he wasn't off the hook yet. The film had also suspected real scenes of animal cruelty. 7 animals were allegedly killed during filming, including a monkey and a large turtle. Deodato and several others were convicted of obscenity and violence, each receiving 4-month suspended sentences. As for the movie, it was banned in over 50 countries. Brett Ratner. 2017 was a turbulent year for Hollywood. As I said, Harvey Weinstein just got exposed, and suddenly everyone's looking at powerful men in the industry with new eyes. And one of them was also this guy, Brett Ratner. This guy who directed the Rush Hour movies and X-Men The Last Stand. 6 women, including actresses Olivia Munn and Natasha Henstridge, accused Ratner of sexual harassment and misconduct spanning decades. Accused is the key word here because he was never actually charged with any crimes, but these were allegations that ended his career without some of them ever seeing the inside of a courtroom. So let's talk about what these women alleged. Natasha Henstridge said that in the early 1990s, when she was 19 and Ratner was in his early 20s, he blocked a doorway in his New York apartment and forced her to perform oral sex. She was a fashion model and he was an aspiring music video director. She said, "He strong-armed me in a real way. He physically forced himself on me." Olivia Munn, meanwhile, said that in 2004, when she was an aspiring actress visiting the set of Ratner's film After the Sunset, she was asked to deliver food to his trailer. When she got there, she found him masturbating. According to Munn, he walked out with his belly sticking out, no pants on, shrimp cocktail in one hand, and he was furiously masturbating in the other. Years later, on a TV show, Ratner actually identified himself as the director Munn had written about in her book, but then claimed he had, quote, banged her a few times, which Munn says is completely false. He later admitted on Howard Stern's show that he never slept with her and expressed regret for making her look, quote, like a whore. Other women described a pattern of aggressive behavior on film sets, including on Rush Hour 2, where multiple actresses said he propositioned them and asked them to expose themselves. One actress, Jamie Ray Newman, alleged he spent an entire flight graphically describing sex acts he wanted to perform on her. But through his attorney, Marine Singer, Ratner categorically disputed all the accounts. No criminal charges were ever filed. But when the usual justice system fails, social justice steps in. Warner Brothers immediately severed their $450 million co-financing deal with his production company. Ratner basically disappeared from Hollywood until now. Because fast forward to January of 2025, guess who's back? Amazon announced that Brett Ratner is directing a documentary about First Lady Melania Trump. The film began shooting in December of 2024 and is set to release in the second half of 2025. We don't know the exact date or any more details, but as you can see, not every accusation ends a career. Lucifer Valentine. Alright, this next case is going to get pretty dark, so fair warning. We're talking about someone who goes by the name Lucifer Valentine, but his real name is allegedly Sean Fedorchuk. Unlike the other guys we've covered, this guy has managed to stay almost completely anonymous. So who is Lucifer Valentine? Well, he's a director behind the Vomit trilogy. 3 extremely disturbing films that focus on situations involving vomiting, cannibalism, graphic sexual violence, gore, torture, and murder. These films are disturbing, yes, but they don't compare to what Valentine himself has openly admitted to doing. In a 2021 Twitter thread, horror influencer Taylor Hyder compiled deeply troubling allegations against Valentine, including claims from multiple alleged victims of grooming and sexual assault. One of them was Amira Levy, the lead actress in his films. In this interview, he flat out admits he met Amira when she was in a terrible state, sick, underweight, addicted, and basically falling apart. He says she showed up at his door, quote, totally lost and nearly insane, and that's when he took her in. From there, in his own words, he says he dominated her through a 24/7 power exchange relationship where she had to do whatever he told her with nothing off limits and all under his control. Maybe I'm not stressing this enough, but he reveals it all in the interview like it's nothing. You know, just another casual day for him. Then he goes to describe in graphic detail his sexual preferences and methods for quote auditioning performers. He talks about having people sign contracts while intoxicated and filming them without clear consent. Here's actually a very interesting question from that interview. What other artistic skills do you possess besides camera work and web design? To which he responds, mutilating beautiful girls that are my friends, and they sign contracts on camera and consent to me cutting them with razors and knives and drinking their blood and spitting in their pretty faces, and choking Amira LaVey till she passes out. My little sister and Cinderella used to eat lots of vanilla pudding and puke it into my mouth, and it actually tasted really good, and giving her the strap and pouring entire bottles of vodka down Hope Licken's throat. Alright, so that should be a direct ticket to jail. Can't believe I just read that. There was definitely a lot of censorship in whatever you guys just heard, but it gets somehow worse because the Cinderella person he's talking about is none other than his own sister. He described her as autistic and legally blind. According to Valentine, Cinderella was nearly blind as she suffered a deteriorative retina disorder, she was diagnosed with ASD, and became completely dependent on him. Valentine went on to claim that, quote, Cinderella truly believed that she and I would get married one day soon and have children, and she was, quote, extremely jealous of his relationship with his lead actress. He said his sister ultimately died by allegedly drowning herself in a bathtub on New Year's Eve 2006. But beyond Valentine's own admissions, multiple alleged victims have come forward with similar stories of grooming and abuse. The pattern described involves Valentine allegedly operating through Facebook fan pages, targeting teenagers and promising them roles in his films. A group of internet investigators eventually tracked down Valentine's alleged real identity as Sean Federschuck, reportedly a Hollywood figure with connections to major productions. They even managed to serve him with legal papers in his Los Angeles apartment, though that was done through an elaborate ruse rather than official legal proceedings. To this day, no criminal charges have been filed against him. James Toback. Do you know the crime drama film Bugsy? Great show that was even nominated for an Oscar back in 1991. It's one of the 90s shows you'd be happy to rewatch, but that's of course not why we're talking about it. The actual reason is that the person who wrote that movie does have some slightly more recent news. James Toback got hit with the Me Too verdict in history. A New York jury ordered him to pay $1.68 billion to 40 women who accused him of SA spanning 35 years. And honestly, when you hear how he operated, you'll understand why the jury was so pissed off. Toback had a completely different method, and it's absolutely brazen. For decades, this guy would literally prowl the streets of New York, approaching random young women and telling them he was a film director. He'd promise them movie roles if they'd meet with him privately. According to the lawsuit, once he got them alone, sometimes at the Harvard Club, sometimes at his apartment, sometimes in public parks, he would demand they engage in sexual acts, telling them it was, quote, part of the job. He had this whole psychological manipulation thing down to a science. One victim, Bryn Chiovitz, described in Vanity Fair how Toback would lecture her when she refused his demands, saying, if you say no, then I have failed. I have failed as a director, and therefore I have failed as a person. He made his victims feel like they were disappointing him by not complying. And he used the same exact script over and over. Actress Julianne Moore came forward in 2017 saying Toback approached her in the 1980s on Columbus Avenue with identical language about auditions, and when she refused, he tried again a month later with the exact same pitch. Ellen Pompeo from Grey's Anatomy said she told Toback to go f*** himself when he approached her. Now here's the scope of this. When the Los Angeles Times first reported on Toback in October of 2017, 38 women came forward. But after that story broke, nearly 400 women contacted the newspaper with similar accusations. That's a systematic pattern of predatory behavior spanning decades. But criminal prosecutors couldn't touch him because the statutes of limitations had expired, so no criminal charges were filed. But then New York enacted something called the Adult Survivors Act, which opened a 1-year window for sexual assault victims to file civil lawsuits regardless of how long ago the abuse occurred. So the lawsuit was filed in 2022, and when it came for trial, Toback didn't even show up. In January of 2025, the judge entered a default judgment against him, and in April, the jury awarded $280 million in compensatory damages and $1.4 billion in punitive damages. That's $42 million per woman in theory, though Toback claims he's financially destitute and couldn't even afford a lawyer. The women may never see a penny of that money, but from the books of the Me Too movement, it's one of those cases that means the days of powerful men thinking they can prey on young women with impunity are over. Louis C.K. A few years ago, this man was basically the king of comedy. His name was everywhere. Louis C.K., the guy who had his own FX show, sold out comedy specials, and was making millions. Then, in November of 2017, everything came crashing down. Back then, the New York Times published a story of multiple women accusing Louis C.K. of sexual misconduct over a 15-year period. But this wasn't a he said she said situation. Back in 2002, comedians Dana Min Goodman and Julia Wallov were invited to Louis C.K.'s hotel room for a nightcap. Once inside, he asked if he could take out his penis and then strip naked and masturbated in front of them. A year later in 2003, comedian Abby Schnashner said she could hear him masturbating while she was on the phone with him. Those were the allegations. But the day the Times article was set to be published, CK released a statement admitting everything. The stories are true, he said. The power I had over these women is that they admired me, and I wielded that power irresponsibly. For a moment, it seemed like this was how accountability was supposed to work. Guy admits wrongdoing, faces consequences, steps back to reflect. CK concluded his statement by saying he would, quote, step back and take a long time to listen, and then the system fails. About 9 months later, CK was back on stage telling jokes about his sexual misconduct, saying things like this one.
If you ever ask somebody, may I jerk off in front of you? And they say yes, just say, are you sure? That's the first part. And then if they say yes, just don't fucking do it. Just don't do it.
Meanwhile, the women who spoke out faced a vicious backlash. Dave Chappelle made jokes about Abby in a Netflix special, mocking her for not even knowing how to hang up a phone and suggesting she wouldn't survive in show business if something that small was holding her back. And CK, well, he went on to self-release 4 comedy specials and won a Grammy for Best Comedy Album in 2020. He created his own thing outside of the traditional business, and the people who love Louis CK are still there. But there was never an actual apology, and he only talked about the repercussions for himself and never for the women involved. Roman Polanski. Next, if you've been following Hollywood scandals over the past few decades, you probably know the name Roman Polanski, the Oscar-winning director who's been living as a fugitive all while continuing to make critically acclaimed films from his European hideout. Now, to be honest with you, Polanski doesn't look like what you'd expect from a Hollywood power player. He looks like an average guy with intense eyes. But don't let that fool you. This is someone who wielded enormous influence in cinema for decades. We're talking about the director of Chinatown, The Pianist, Rosemary's Baby, films that are considered masterpieces. He won an Academy Award for Best Director for The Pianist in 2003, though he couldn't attend the ceremony. Why? Well, because he's been a fugitive from American justice for over 4 decades. That goes back to March of 1977. Polanski was arrested and charged with drugging and raping a 13-year-old girl named Samantha Gamer. He allegedly gave the child alcohol and drugs at Jack Nicholson's house during what was supposed to be a photo shoot for Vogue. The original charges included sodomy and furnishing drugs to a minor. Somehow, Polanski worked out a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to just 1 count of unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor, avoiding the more serious charges. The judge was expected to sentence him to time served and probation. Then something changed. In February of 1978, the night before his sentencing, Polanski learned the judge might reject the plea deal and impose prison time. So what did he do? Well, he fled to England and then France. And just like that, he was gone. Now you might think this would end his career. Well, you'd be very wrong. Polanski kept making films from Europe, where his French citizenship protected him from extradition. The guy went on to direct some of cinema's most acclaimed works while living as a fugitive. He made Tess, The Ghostwriter, The Pianist, the latter earning him that Oscar he couldn't collect in person. And while all of that was happening, the allegations kept coming. Multiple women have come forward over the years, claiming Polanski assaulted them when they were minors. Charlotte Lewis accused him of assault in 1983 when she was 16. Another woman sued him in 2023, claiming he her in 1973 when she was also underage. The most recent lawsuit was set for trial in August of 2025, but was settled out of court in October of 2024. The terms were undisclosed, but both parties claimed mutual satisfaction with the agreement. The thing is, out of all the cases we've looked at so far, this director is one Hollywood protected, and protected hard for a long time. In 2009, over 100 film industry figures signed a petition calling for his release when he was briefly detained in Switzerland. We're talking Martin Scorsese, Woody Allen, Harrison Ford, major names defending a convicted child rapist. Today, at 92, Polanski remains in France, still a fugitive. He hasn't set foot on American soil since 1978. Meanwhile, his victim Samantha Gamer has publicly forgiven him and asked that the case be dropped, though that doesn't erase what he did or the pattern of allegations that followed. Benoit Jacquot and Jacques Doillon. Now that last one was about France and film. We need to also talk about Benoit Jacquot and Jacques Doillon, 2 names that carry serious weight in the prestigious French cinema. In case you haven't heard of them before, which if you're in the US you've likely never have, Jacquot directed Farewell My Queen, which snagged 3 César Awards, and Doillon made The Little Gangster and Poney, films that established him as one of France's most respected filmmakers. But that's not why they're making headlines these days. So what happened? Well, in February of 2024, actress Judith Godrèche came forward with allegations of rape and SA of a minor. Godrèche claims that Jacquot, who's 25 years older than her, started a relationship with her when she was just 14 years old back in 1986. She was cast in his film Les Mendiants, and according to her allegations, this wasn't just an inappropriate relationship. It was predation that lasted 6 years. Now, Jacquot was 39 at the time. So it's basically another case of a grown man in a position of power allegedly beginning a sexual relationship with a minor, a 14-year-old in this case. Gradage described having an unhealthy hold over her during those years. She even starred in his 1990 film, I'm not going to pronounce that's going to be on the screen, while allegedly being abused by him. As for Doillon, Gradage alleges he sexually assaulted her during the filming of La Fille de 15 Ants in the 1980s. The assault allegedly happened at the home Doillon shared with his partner at the time, Jane Birkin. Gradage was 15 and playing the lead role in his film when she claimed this happened. Both directors have denied those allegations, and I have to stress, these are allegations. They haven't been charged with any crimes yet. Jacquot's lawyer said he'd requested to be heard since the beginning of the investigation, and that he would, quote, finally be able to express himself before authorities. But surprise, Gradage wasn't the only one. After she came forward, other actresses started speaking out. Julia Roy accused Jacquot of SA, and Isla de Besco accused him of during multiple incidents between 1998 and 2007. Anna Muglelis also came forward with allegations against Doillon. In July of 2024, both directors were detained for questioning by Paris police, specifically by the Juvenile Protection Brigade. That's not a coincidence. And looking back, these directors had reputations for working with young, unknown actresses, launching careers of people like Sandrine Bonnaire, Charlotte Gainsbourg, and Juliette Binoche. Doillon was known for giving lead roles to new and debuting female actors. Now people are asking, isn't that a coincidence too? The allegations have led to France's parliament approving a commission to investigate abuse in the film industry. It's been a long time coming for French cinema, which has been criticized for protecting powerful men. Bryan Singer. If you grew up watching superhero movies in the 2000s, you definitely know Bryan Singer's work. This guy basically created the modern superhero movie template with the original X-Men in 2000. Before Marvel became a household name, before comic book movies ruled the box office, Singer was the visionary behind films that made over $3 billion worldwide. The Usual Suspects, Superman Returns, 4 X-Men movies, Bohemian Rhapsody, all his works. But now you also have to add the allegations we're about to talk about to his resume. Growing up in New Jersey, he was this film-obsessed kid who started making movies at 12, inspired by Spielberg. His rise was meteoric. His debut feature, Public Access, won the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance in 1993, and his follow-up, The Usual Suspects, made him an A-list director before he turned 30. The thing is, even during his early success, there were warning signs. Back in 1997, while filming Apartment Pupil, at least 5 teenage boys filed lawsuits claiming they were bullied into stripping naked for a shower scene. The suits were settled for an undisclosed sum, but that was just the beginning. Now, the most damning allegations came in a massive 2019 Atlantic investigation that spent 12 months taking to over 50 sources. 4 men came forward claiming Singer sexually assaulted them when they were minors. One man, Victor Valdovinos, claimed Singer him on the Apartment Pupil set when he was just 13 years old. Valdovinos says Singer grabbed him in the locker room, told him he was good looking and had a nice Ferrari, and sexually assaulted him multiple times throughout the day. Things got worse with something they called the Digital Entertainment Network scandal. Turns out he invested in this company that was supposed to make content for teens, but according to lawsuits, the company's mansion became a party house where teenage boys were allegedly given drugs and alcohol and abused by older men. And yes, he was a regular at these parties. 2 men told The Atlantic they had sex with Singer when they were underage, one at 15, another at 17. Both say Singer knew they were minors, and the pattern kept repeating over the years. In 2017, Cesar Sanchez Guzman filed a lawsuit claiming Singer raped him when he was 17. Singer settled that case for $150,000 in 2019. Then came that Atlantic expose with 4 more accusers. So what happened to Singer's career? Well, he got fired from Bohemian Rhapsody in 2017, though the film still earned him over $40 million in profit participation. He was hired to direct Red Sonja for $10 million, but Millennium Films dropped him when they couldn't find a domestic distributor due to the allegations. And just a quick note, the protagonist of Red Sonja is a sexual assault survivor. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Lately, it's been reported that he's worked on a self-financed documentary about himself and his, quote, struggles, planning to address the allegations of sexual misconduct. Karl Erik Rinsch. So far, we've talked about some pretty dark stuff when it comes to directors and sexual misconduct. But this case is different. This is about old-fashioned fraud and what happens when streaming money meets Hollywood delusions of grandeur. That's Karl Rinsch, the director who managed to convince Netflix to give him $61 million for a sci-fi series and then spent it on everything except actually making the show. This might be your first time hearing his name, and for a reason. His biggest claim to fame before this whole mess was directing 47 Ronin in 2013. You know, that Keanu Reeves samurai movie that bombed spectacularly and cost Universal at least $120 million. Not exactly the resume that screams give this guy tens of millions more. But Rinsch had something in Hollywood even more valuable than money: connections. Keanu Reeves backed him, he considered Ridley Scott a mentor, and he'd made some impressive commercials for BMW and Mercedes. Oh, and he had this passion project called White House, a sci-fi series about humanoid AI beings that was supposed to be the next Blade Runner meets Westworld. So when Netflix was in its throw money at everything phase back in 2018, former Netflix exec Cindy Holland snatched up White Horse from Amazon for $44 million. They renamed it Conquest and gave Rinsch something almost unheard of, final cut control. That meant he could make all the creative decisions without studio interference. Red flag number 1. Rinsch had already shot 6 short episodes, ranging from 4 to 10 minutes each, and still needing millions more to complete just 7 more episodes. But Netflix was feeling generous. The thing is, once production resumed in Brazil, Uruguay, and Budapest, everything started falling apart. Crew members complained about his erratic behavior on set. Reports described him as increasingly unstable, punching holes in the walls, misusing prescription drugs, and even publicly accusing his wife of plotting to assassinate him. And as always does, it gets worse. In 2020, Rinsch told Netflix he needed another $11 million to complete the series. And somehow, despite having basically nothing to show for their initial investment, Netflix wired him the money. At one point, this became a federal crime, because according to prosecutors, Rinsch immediately transferred that $11 million to his personal brokerage account. Instead of finishing the show, he went on an expensive shopping spree. 5 Rolls Royces, a $28,000 sofa, and get this, 2 mattresses that cost $650,000 each. But that wasn't even the craziest part. Rinsch lost about half the money in failed stock market trades within 2 months. Then he dumped the rest into Dogecoin, which actually worked out for a while. His crypto portfolio briefly hit $26.7 million. Meanwhile, he kept telling Netflix that Conquest was awesome and moving forward really well, while literally doing zero work on the show. During one meeting with Netflix executives, Rinsch spent most of the time sharing various theories he had been developing about COVID, the universe, interconnectivity, genders, God, higher callings, and reproduction, instead of discussing the series. Eventually, Netflix had enough. They wrote off the entire $55 million investment in late 2020, but Rinsch wasn't done. He actually sued Netflix, claiming they owed him $14 million. He used their own money to pay his lawyers. The company won a $12 million arbitration award against him, and the director is now so broke that the federal government has to pay for his plane ticket to attend his own fraud trial. His trial is set for December 2nd, 2025, and if convicted, he's looking at potentially decades in prison. Alright guys, that was it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like. I was actually wrong. This won't be the last video you'll see from me for a month. It's going to be the next video. That's going to be the last video you see from me for a month. But yeah, like I was saying, the whole month of October, I won't really be here. November, we're coming back even crazier with this project I've been working on, and it's I can't shut up about it, so I'm going to have to end the video because I would leak so much stuff. But yeah, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time I upload.